I'm Juliet Scott-Croxford, CEO at Worth Media and your moderator for today. And I'm delighted to be joined by our special guest today, Roger Dow, President and CEO of the US Travel Association, Neil Jacobs, CEO of Six Senses Hotel Resorts and Spas, Robert Chase, CEO of Visit Barbados, and Kathleen Entwistle, Managing Director of Morgan Stanley Private Wealth Management. Hi, speakers.
Hi, morning.
Hello, everybody. Hi.
Thank you. So just before we get started, our intention at Worth is to create conversations that help inspire and inform our community, many of whom are investors or private business owners, as well as global travelers, on topics such as this with thought leaders and experts in their industry. So we hope you find it useful, and we hope you enjoy the session and our future sessions. Forward thinking is the essence of this series, The Next Normal, where Worth is looking ahead to what the world looks like after the current crisis passes, and how specific businesses and industries and sectors are not only responding to the existing challenges, but also what they're doing to transform and to innovate and to pivot and to prepare for the future. Our 9th session is focused on the future of travel and tourism, which has been under extraordinary pressure over the past few months. And we'll be looking at how this sector is adapting and what the new norm for travel will look like for tourists and industry professionals. And we're delighted to have Roger Dow, Neil Jacobs, Robert Chase and Kathleen Entwistle with us to share their perspectives on how travel and tourism is changing on so many levels. So a few housekeeping rules just before we get started. This is a conversation and we do welcome questions from the audience. You are muted on entry into this session, but you can use your chat function at the bottom of the screen, type in a question to me, Juliet Scott-Croxford, and I'll either weave it into the conversation or happy to come to you directly so you can ask the speaker the question yourself. As I said, we're happy to weave it in. If you prefer to stay anonymous, that's totally fine. So let's get started. We've got a great group with us today. Firstly, a personal check-in with our speakers. How are you doing personally? How are you managing your own well-being during these unusual times? Roger, let's start with you. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. I feel like I'm playing the world's largest game of whack-a-mole and spending time between St. Petersburg, Florida, where I live, if you're with the IRS, and Washington, D.C., where I work.
Thank you. And Robert, how about you in Barbados?
We're doing great. You know, this is one of the craziest periods you could ever expect. With all of these Zoom meetings, your life has been completely transformed. Working from home was a completely different experience, and you jump out of bed and some days, and then you realize at 7 o'clock you've been in front of a Zoom meeting for the whole day and you haven't even had breakfast. So it's been a strange transformation, but at the same time, it is so pivotal a period for us as a tourism destination. Our livelihoods depend on tourism, so it is a critical period, and it's important work that's being done.
Thank you. And Neil, I know you split your time between New York and Singapore. I think you're in Singapore, so you may have a glass of wine. I know it's early here, but it's not early there. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. I mean, I am in Singapore, and it's been an interesting time for me. Normally my life is 70% traveling or on a plane going somewhere or other. And it's been several months not leaving anywhere. So it's taken some adjustment, and actually it's pretty good. I don't think I may not get on a plane again, but it's feeling great. So life is all right, all things considered.
Thank you. And Kathy, how are you doing? You've been an incredible partner for this series. It would be great to introduce yourself and share a bit about your background and what you're doing and how you're doing.
Sure. Thanks, Juliet. So Kathy Entwistle, I'm a managing director at Morgan Stanley, and I work with individuals and families, C-suite executives and entrepreneurs to help them just with their overall wealth management picture, not just the investing, but the wealth, beyond investing. And a lot of the topics that we talk about weekly apply to our clients. And I also love to meet your guests, always amazing guests like today's panel. It just opens and expands what we're doing and how we can help our clients with some more, insights. So I would say I'm probably very typical of most people right now, where we've been, sort of in quarantine and work from home for 13 weeks. We're starting to get back out into the open again, and very anxious to move from, burnout, which we said pre-quarantine working hours normal was 9 to 5. Quarantine is 5 to 9. And I think everybody's ready for a little something different. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from the panel and seeing a movement, hopefully, towards more travel and being able to find that sort of balance again.
Yeah, and Roger, I'd love to just hear a bit about your background and your area of focus. And we talked a bit the other day just about the extraordinary impact on the travel and tourism sector that the pandemic has had. Have you ever experienced anything at this scale previously?
Juliet, I haven't seen anything even close to this. We're looking at it 9 times worse than September 11th, and that was a horrific thing that happened. So no, I've never seen anything like this. My background simply started in college as a lifeguard at a hotel company called Marriott. They had 6 hotels, hung around for about 34 years. And now I run a trade association that whole job is to get more people traveling, representing the whole travel industry.
And the economic impact is extraordinary. Share some of the numbers that you shared with us previously.
Sure. Yeah, the numbers of the travel industry, we're going to lose $520 billion, that's with a B, $1 billion, 45% of the entire travel industry. More harmful is the number of people that are out of work. We have 15.8 million people that get their jobs in the US through travel. 8.1 million of those people are out of work at the present time. That's 51%. To put it in perspective, I went back and looked at the worst year of the Great Depression, which was 1932, 1933, and it was 25.5%. So while the country is in a recession, the travel industry is in a depression, and international travel has gone to zero. 285 billion, 80 million travelers.
And it's so sobering. Robert, I mean, you're reliant on people coming and flying into Barbados. What's the impact been on you as an island over the last few months?
Well, the impact has been catastrophic in the sense that probably 40% of Barbados's GDP is directly related to tourism, or 30% directly, and probably 45% indirectly related to tourism. So with hotels closed and with attractions closed and restaurants closed, we're seeing a phenomenal drain on our government's resources for payment of unemployment benefits so that people can continue to live. Because at the end of the day, you have to make sure people can live and sustain themselves during this lockdown. So it's placed our country at a critical point in terms of how to manage that drain on cash at a time when you don't have cash coming in. And while we've been fortunate that we went into this period with a significant amount of foreign reserves and as a open economy, which is heavily dependent on foreign exchange earnings, we were fortunate that we did have a significant amount of foreign reserves at that point in time. But that is being drained by the fact that we don't have new foreign exchange coming in. And at the same time, you have to be paying out for various normal requirements. So it's placed the government under a tremendous financial burden and balancing between making sure you have the resources to sustain our healthcare system, which is critical to life. And we are fortunate that we are a small island, but we have an extremely sophisticated and developed healthcare system. We've been so fortunate in that regard that while other countries are seeing a significant level of COVID presence, we've only had 100 cases and a small number of deaths. Any death is critical, but is tragic, but we've only had 7 deaths. So we are in a COVID-free region, but in order to maintain that, we have to make sure that we don't overwhelm our healthcare system. And so you have to put the resources in place. In a short space of time, we built a new hospital specifically for isolation of persons within the space of a month. So that's the type of challenge we're faced with at a time when economic input is so critical to the country from the tourism sector, which is flat on its back, as was just alluded to.
And Neil, I think you have 15 properties, right? How has sort of day-to-day operations been impacted for you?
Yeah. We have 15 closed. We actually have, we're closer to 20 operating and about another 20 under development. And, you know, sadly, it didn't take very long for them all to be closed. We've opened 3 or 4 since then, or reopened, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But, you know, although we're not a country or a national organization, you know, the impact is the same. I mean, we operate in probably 20 different countries now, and just the impact on our employees, you know, our owners, because you know, we're a management company, so every hotel is owned by somebody else. So there are so many stakeholders and lenders and owners, and employees, and ourselves as the operators, and everyone is severely impacted. And we also operate in a lot of, you know, developing world environments where the employees are really not paid huge amounts of money. So, you know, every dollar is important to their well-being. And, you know, we've been in non-revenue environments for several months now. So it's been tough, but we will prevail. I have a positive view of the future, actually, but it's not been a simple time, for sure.
Roger, how long do you think it will take for the travel industry in the US to recover, and what do you think it will take for the travel industry to get back to kind of pre-COVID earnings?
Well, we finished 2019. I was doing something at the National Press Club, talked about the state of the travel industry, and it was in February, and I referred to the 10 greatest years. Every single month for 10 years, the travel industry in the US was bigger than the year before. And as Neil said, to watch it go to almost zero is something else. Recovery, I think, is going to be slow. It's going to be regional, and then it's going to be domestic, and then meetings and conventions, and then finally international. The draconian people say, I saw something the other day, 2024. I'm like Neil, I'm an optimist. I think it'll come back more quickly, but people have to get confidence to travel, know it's safe to travel around the world. And as that comes, I think it will come back fairly quickly, actually quicker than we think. And I don't subscribe to 2024, but I think 2020 is going to be an extremely slow recovery. And then 2021, I think we'll start getting closer to coming back to normal.
And there's been talk of a travel tax credit in the US. Can you share a bit about that, the Explore America tax credit? How will that help?
Yes, we're working on 4 things to try and help stimulate. First would be a temporary travel tax credit that would go through the end of next year, the end of 2021, and it would allow American households to deduct 50% of their travel expenses over $50, restaurants, hotels, theme parks, airlines, etc., and up to $4,000 per household. We're also asking to restore the deductibility of food and beverage for business. It makes no sense if you have a box at Yankee Stadium, you can pay for the boxes and it's a business expense, but you can't deduct the hot dog. Makes no sense. So we want to get that back. And lastly, we're looking for a $10 billion grant, a promotional grant from the Economic Development Administration of the Commerce Department to get states and destinations to be able to recover, because they're broke. They've lost all their money. They have nothing coming in, as Neil said. And so we've got to get them back. And we're also looking for a tax credit for meetings and events. So those 4 things combined could really bring us back much, much faster.
And Kathy, how does the tax credit compare to the sort of second stimulus check?
That's a great question. I guess it's the same concept. It's a way to incentivize people. So I think that's a really great idea, because probably when we look at the numbers, where you're getting most of the revenue is from the, you know, mass travelers, right? Many people doing it. So by being able to incentivize families to do so, I think that makes sense. And Roger, I think too, like there's a woman like Cinda Boomershine, I think is her name. She goes around, she's very popular, and she does these family travels. And I think it would be a really great connection for you, because maybe she can, you know, do some post on Instagram for that concept, you know, in terms of synergies. But yeah, I think that overall it makes sense. And I agree with what everybody said. I'm an optimist as well. It is very dire right now, but my thought is, as I think Roger said, 2021 we'll start to see some movement, and by 2022, I would expect us to be back, you know, in a regular sync or pattern with travel. The last thing I would say too is that just like we talk about companies, that you know, cash is king, and having that cash flow or those strong balance sheets, I think this is a really good reminder. And you know, we do get reminded every, you know, couple of decades or so when we have some major impact. As Roger said, 9/11, I mean, that was an unbelievable time, and very different from now, and the financial crisis. But I think what it reminds us is you have to have cash, you have to have your balance sheets strong so that when you do run into trouble, you can get through it. So I would imagine that any travel or leisure company that has strong balance sheets that can get through this next year and a half or so will come out on the other end, you know, surviving and then hopefully thriving. And those that don't are the ones that are going to be challenged. And whether or not there's government stimulus or some sort of program to support that will make a difference. But just based on balance sheet alone, I think that's really going to be key. And I hope it's something that everybody remembers personally and professionally forward, to always make sure you have that strong liquidity, you know, access for events like this.
Thank you. And I just want to say a warm welcome to some people that have recently joined. We're talking about the future of the travel and tourism industry with Roger Dow, Robert Chase, Neil Jacobs, and Kathleen Entwistle. And feel free to message me any questions you have for the speakers to Juliet, Scott-Croxford. I want to just shift our focus to reopening. And I know we're all at sort of different stages of that, be it country, hotel, island. Neil, how are you approaching it and ensuring properties are sort of COVID free, or kind of sort of encouraging sort of consumer confidence to get people back into the properties that you are reopening?
Well, it's fascinating actually, because you know, in the 3 or 4 properties that we've reopened, and it's kind of counterintuitive, but our guests don't seem to be overly concerned about the health and safety piece. And clearly, you know, we've spent a lot of time introducing protocols like most other hotel companies in the world, that are going to safeguard the health and safety of both our guests and our employees. But I think maybe, I don't know, you know, we operate at the higher end of the market, and I think our guests just expect that we're going to do the necessary, and that there's an inbred trust, particularly given, you know, my particular company is very driven by wellness as a core value. So there's just that expectation that from the safety perspective, we're going to take care of it. And so, you know, our first property that reopened, which was in Vietnam on a private island, I mean, guests were arriving, and first thing they're doing is like ripping their masks off and then wanting to jump into the ocean. I mean, everybody is so desperate for experience and connection and some social interaction and so on and so on, to the point that we have to say, you know, you need to take it a little easy here. We have some rules, but that pent-up demand just seems to be so strong. You know, we're fortunate enough that most of our hotels, particularly the beach properties, are in villas, so people have space. Restaurants are generally outdoors, so that's all helpful, and the social distancing is effectively built into how we design hotels. So I think we're lucky there. But people just want to have a good time and enjoy themselves. So today, we're not insisting that guests wear masks. We do take their temperatures. All our employees are masked. So just want to feel normal again.
Yeah. And what are the other 2 properties that you've opened up? So you've opened up...
Yeah. We opened, I mean, we started reopening in Asia because Asia, is coming back first. The first one we opened is in Western China, just outside Chengdu, where the pandas are. And, that's been busy from the day we opened, particularly at weekends. And then in Vietnam, I mean, this month in our property in Vietnam, we will run 93% occupancy. I don't think we've ever run 93% occupancy for a month. So it's extraordinary. And that's purely with domestic, as Roger was saying, I mean, the domestic piece of it is the same everywhere. So in Vietnam, we have Vietnamese and we have expatriates living in Vietnam. But, those are the numbers that are coming through. We reopened in southern Turkey, outside Bodrum, again with villas, and that's doing well. And Bali, we're open. And to support Kathleen's comment around, cash is king right now. And in Bali, we tried out, the pay now, stay later schemes, which were giving people, were really incentivizing people to book now and claim their space, even if they didn't have a date that they wanted to fix. We gave a range, and we've generated like 10,000 room nights in a period of 3 or 4 weeks, which is extraordinary. But what it's done is help generate cash flow now to keep things moving and keep, our employees on some level of compensation and so on. And then we opened in Portugal. So we did Europe as well.
In the Douro Valley. And the spa, you touched on this earlier, the spa and wellness aspect of Six Senses is so integrated into it. Is the spa, is all of that in the properties that have reopened, is all of that fully functioning now as well?
It is functioning. And for us, I mean, we have, 35 spas around the world, but for us, spa is not wellness. Spa is one element of wellness. So, the breadth of our programming is way deeper than just spa. And you get some guests who are just frightened of it, but most are not. And with the health, protocols that we have in place, the safety protocols, it seems to be okay. The therapist is wearing a mask. They're not wearing gloves. We didn't insist on that, but the business still seems to be coming in. It takes longer. We clean longer, so we can't pack our guests in perhaps at the same frequency, because it just takes longer to clean the treatment room after it's been used, but still functioning.
And Robert, how are you approaching reopening Barbados? Because you're so reliant on aviation and commercial aviation from different countries. How phased is that, and how much are you actually deciding on where you want to bring passengers in from as well?
Yeah. And as you just alluded to, aviation and air seats is so critical to us. And touching on what Neil alluded to earlier, the whole question of protocols is a fundamental aspect of that journey. Giving them confidence to travel, and picking up on what Neil also said about people just want to feel at ease and peaceful and a sense of not to have to worry about all the other things they're worrying about back home. So we have to make sure those protocols give them that initial sense of comfort, that sense that, okay, these guys are doing what they should do. So therefore, I don't have to be fearful of the whole question of contracting this virus. And also we have to resolve the problem of travel insurance. And that is really a critical one because, for example, in the UK, the Home Office order, which stipulates that they're discouraging travel, then means that travel insurance is going to be violated if you travel. So therefore, how do we give those persons that comfort that if you travel and were you to contract the virus, you are taken care of? So we're looking at how to come up with some sort of travel insurance models that give them that comfort level so that they know I have a peace of mind. When I travel, I'm going to be okay. And then also at the same time, for Barbados as a destination, the whole question of interaction with the local population is such a pivotal part of what differentiates us. We're not really a fly and flop destination, just come and lie on the beach. It's come and lie on the beach, but then also get out to one of our great restaurants and meet some people, interact with all sorts of cultural elements, or go to a rum shop and meet some people and do things that you've never experienced before, and be transformed by that process. We have an alfresco dining arrangement or event that takes place on the Fridays, and people from the same Sandy Lane that we were talking about, Kathleen, go and rub shoulders with some of the most common people, because it is really just a chance to put your feet in the sand and relax and let your hair down and be completely at ease. So to have that continuation of that kind of environment is critical, that in this new era, how do we make sure that people understand that they are safe and that the local population does not feel that these people are coming from high risk source markets that may have a high level of presence of the virus, and therefore there's this. So one of the things we're working through is the whole question of testing. How do we go about giving the person traveling an understanding that if you do a COVID-19 PCR test and it is negative, you're free to come, and you're coming into an environment which is also COVID-free, so you're going to be at ease and not have to worry about then being quarantined, because obviously that's a critical factor. Nobody's going to, very few people, I should say, are going to want to travel somewhere to quarantine for 14 days and then travel back home to quarantine for 14 days. I mean, that's really just not a normal vacation situation, talking about the next normal. So that whole question of coming up with avenues and mechanisms which provide protocols that give people a sense of safety, and at the same time overcome some of these issues like travel insurance and avoiding quarantine are some of the issues that we're working through, and working through with the airlines, because that needs to be a process which the airlines also buy into. And they also have to see the capacity in order to put on the flights, because as you said, we're an island, so if flights don't come in, nobody's swimming here, right? So it's a case of we really need those airlines to come in, and we are not going to be able to survive on the domestic tourism, as was alluded to earlier, as our primary source of keeping hotels open. We really need visitors to come, and that's a function of airlines. And the airlines are going to want to see the load factors. So, and they're introducing interesting new measures. We have a company, Caledonian Jets, which is going to introduce this is for high net worth individuals. So for £7,500 per seat, you get a lie flat bed scenario. You're checked into a hotel by the airport the day before. You do your PCR test. You get back your results. You know that you are COVID negative. You're therefore cleared to travel. Your documentation is taken, and you have that kind of very highly personalized, but also very, very safe and very sense of being pampered, while at the same time making sure that there's not going to be a disconnect between the local population and the traveler in terms of that sense of comfort between the two.
And I'd like to go to some questions in the audience shortly, but Roger, we touched on this sort of notion of consumer confidence, and even when I think travellers are able to travel, I think there's a big sort of psychological hurdle to come over as well. What has the association been doing around that sort of consumer confidence piece?
Right, Julie, this is so different than September 11th, where it was 3 locations and you knew exactly what had happened, how horrific it was. But the story, every time you turn on the news, you get a different story. One doctor tells you you're going to die tomorrow, next doctor says not to worry about it, like the flu. So what we're doing is we brought the whole industry together to set a set of common guidelines for health and safety, the minimum that everyone would do, and then each one would take it further, like airlines would do HEPA filters and things. My salary grade to understand, but the bottom line, really clean air. So we put those guidelines together because we did a lot of research. We said if the travel industry tells you it's safe to travel, only 23% said they'd believe us. They said that they're going to be self-serving. If the government told you it's safe to travel, they said same thing. 25% government just wants people to travel to get more money. Even health officials, 34%. But when we asked them, if you heard the same believable, credible story from health officials, the travel industry, and government together, what's your intent to travel? And it goes up to 70%, 70. So that's so important that we have protocols in place that are common, not only in the US, but all over the world. Someone has to know when they go to Barbados, they're going to have the same safety measures that they have when they're in New York City, or if they're going to Greece or Asia.
I'm going to go to a couple of questions now. We have one from Abdul Nasani. Abdul, are you there? Hello. Hi, Abdul. I think your question, who was your question for? Was it for Neil?
First question was for Mr. Neil. I was wondering, hi, Mr. Neil, how are you?
Good, thank you. Thank you.
I was going to ask you about the measures that hotels and wellness centers are taking in the meantime to be COVID friendly. As you know, these changes or measures they are taking require investment. Should this investment for a long term or planned until 18 months or 2 years, where is the vaccine expected to be in place?
I mean, I think the last part of your question is a very good question, because this thing is moving so fast, and you know, if I go back, you know, 90 days, the things we were talking about and deciding to do were out of date within 24 hours, you know, and we would regroup and change our thinking. So whether this is all here forever remains to be seen. Certainly we've looked at it from two very clear perspectives around health and safety, and one of the things we've been talking about, from masks and cleaning protocols of rooms and detergents that we use, and you know, protective clothing and equipment where necessary. So you know, we've dotted all those I's and crossed the T's too. The question then is, you know, we're looking at things like, you know, ozone cleansing, which is predominantly with water. We are in the middle of studying far UV lighting, which is kind of different to just the regular UV, and you know, which for us is less relevant on a beach resort, but a little more relevant in an urban hotel with enclosed corridors and enclosed public spaces and so on. So we're looking at all of those things, and most likely, you know, 60 to 70% of them will stay forever because they're very good. I mean, they're just good protocols. The question really is, you know, how much money does one spend on really sophisticated equipment that and capital, when money is very short, that might be a good story today, but truthfully, you know, may not be so relevant tomorrow. So we tend to, you know, we have 4 or 5 different things we're convincing our owners to buy, and we're doing relatively well in doing that. But to us, it's more about, what is the environment like? How are you creating the software? How are you providing an environment for people to reconnect, to come back together again? You know, we're designing all kinds of programs, wellness programs around compassion, around gratitude, around love. I mean, things that hotel guys don't usually talk about, because this is the true wellness. This is how we see the wellness of the future, you know, as distinct from spa. So that aspect of it, and creating that trust and comfort and consciousness around what you're doing, we see as equally as important as initiatives that need to come out of COVID. So I'm not sure if that answers the question, but that's what we're doing.
I'd like to chime in on that too, Abdul. I agree with everything that Neil said. I think a large portion is going to be with us for the long term. If you look at what happened during September 11th, the security measures, that was 19 years ago. But we have more and more security measures in place. I hope the masks go away soon, and they will at some point. But I think a whole lot of things we put in place will stay. And I think we're blessed with technology where it is today. Your handheld phone is going to become much more of a tool, from check-in, from payment, from touchless, biometrics we've been trying to push forward for airports and all that is going to go much, much faster now. So I agree with everything you said. I think a lot of it is really good. It's going to be here to stay. And a lot of it, I think, will fall by the wayside as the disease subsides.
I think the technology piece is interesting. I went to a restaurant yesterday and we had a QR code which we used to get the menu up. So rather than the servers giving us menus themselves, we used the QR code to get the menu up, which I found fascinating that things had already shifted like that. Abdul, I think you had one more question for Kathy as well.
Yeah. Thank you for the answers. Yes, I have one more question for Ms. Kathleen. I have seen a movement with middle-sized investors for entering to the wellness industry. And I encourage that actually, and starting to speak with some investors, because I believe it's a very good time now, taking in consideration that a vaccine will show up maybe hopefully within 18 months or 2 years. They have a big chance on the properties values in terms of rent or buying, one. And second thing, there is lots of availability of professional staff which have been let go by their companies. And this one's a very critical issue for the investors in the wellness industry. Either they have to invest big time in the training, or they have to pay a high salary for professional staff. Now, my question is, if there is any other, from your point of view, any other points or to encourage the investor to come to the wellness industry more?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Actually, we're seeing a lot of investors be more and more interested in anything that you would consider impact investing. And I think the wellness is certainly an impact investing area. I also think that there's only a few times that we have opportunities to invest in something and for a return that is significantly more than what we would normally think we would be able to get. Certainly March was a big time. Anyone that was brave enough in the middle of March to go into the equity markets as a whole. But I also think when you see industries that are beaten up and have an opportunity to recover, I wouldn't look necessarily at the entire industry. I would look at those companies in the industry that are employing, as Neil said, technology, and I think maybe Roger said that as well, in order to sort of facilitate whatever they're doing. So I call that digital transformation, e-commerce, like anything that is using technology to develop like the timeline or the supply chain or whatever that is. I think that's a huge win. And those are the type of companies that I think will do well. So if you match wellness with digital transformation, that would be a great investment, I would think, particularly after being beaten up.
Thank you. Thank you.
I want to move to sort of strategies going forward and future next. So there's one other question, I think, from Benita Lubick. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
I was interested, the people are coming to the resorts. Are they staying strictly on the resorts, at the hotels? Are they getting out and sightseeing?
That's also a great question, because we believe, I mean, many of our resorts are quite remote, so we bring the culture in. But I think where the trend is going is that people who in the past have perhaps, gone long haul and because they've gone so far have wanted to visit 2 or 3 different places on that trip, I think the trend that we're going to see is that they don't do that they go to a place, that they stay in one place, that they do go out, that they do visit, but they're not going, to Indonesia and going to Bali and Lombok and Jakarta and somewhere else, or the same in India, that they're kind of dialing it down a little bit and being more conscious about what they're doing, how they're spending their days, and also taking that time to go, what we find, to go a little more inward. And, you know, the number of yoga classes that they do and the meditation classes and kind of some of the more holistic wellness programming, I think that's an offshoot and will continue to be of this period that we're going through. So I definitely feel there's a shift, and that's resulting in people taking it a little easier when they do go on these trips.
Thank you, Benita.
If I can add to that one bit, I think you're going to see coming back on-premise dining and on-premise retail. I think it sort of went away from the hotels, and but I think what Neil mentioned, I think has a real plus. The dining rooms often in hotels didn't do so well. I think you're going to see an upsurge in patronage of those dining rooms and the need for people to say, hey, what else do you have in retail?
Yeah. Along those lines, while obviously that all-inclusive element is growing and is an important aspect, for us as a destination, it is so critical that we get people out into the destination and into the community, because we think that's the differentiating experience. That's what transforms them. And we do believe that the whole question of, while there is this focus of concern around exposure, once you create a safe environment and a safe haven, a sense of safety within the destination, I think we will continue to see that engaging the community, because people travel for different experiences. They travel to be transformed. They travel to, whether it be for health and wellness or from a point of view of mindfulness. I think that mindfulness, as Neil was alluding to, through more meditation and so forth, is critical. But then you can still do that out in the vistas. You can get out into the destination and have those quiet moments out in the community, or out on the beach, or out on the in the different areas. So we think that juxtapositioning of how do you continue to give them that sense of safety, that's the critical element. I think people want to explore, at least the persons that come to our destination want to explore, and we encourage that. So how do we continue to give them that sense of safety and balance that? Because as a country, obviously it is critical that foreign exchange or that investment continues to go beyond just the property and into the community. So that's what then keeps the tourism alive. So the sustainability of the industry depends on that fluidity of the cash flow and of the investment beyond just the resort for us.
I think the beauty with Barbados, Robert, as well, is your East Coast, Bathsheba, and all along there is so remote. So actually it is more remote than where a lot of the beautiful properties are on the west and the south side. I'm curious on how the restaurants are doing, because there are some incredible restaurants. You've got Fish Pots and the Cliff, and I'm a huge fan of the island. How right now are they open, and are locals eating there? And if people are more inclined to stay on property, how are they thinking about future?
Yeah. So in the immediate future, we're due to reopen our commercial airspace around mid-July, because we're making sure we get those protocols right and get the messaging right, so that people have that sense of safety and understand what's required to travel. Some of the restaurants, some of them have gone to a delivery or a takeout or a curbside type of solution. Some of the larger ones have found that is not an economic model for them, so they've remained closed. So some are kind of preparing and anticipating the return to the new normal in terms of this post-COVID period, when visitors begin to travel back in larger numbers, while others have taken the point of managing to attract the local population to dine in or dine with them through roadside type of situations at this point in time. So it's a bit of a mixed bag for different restaurants, but it's critical that we get them going again, because they can only last so long without that valid cash inflow. You know, cash is king in that decision. And
Roger, thinking about sort of future, and you said that you're an optimist as well. What are your thoughts on sort of the pivots that we're going to need to take, and what shifts are we going to see over the long haul that you think are going to really sort of help the travel and tourism industry thrive again?
I think one of the things the industry is going to have to look at is We're working very hard. This is inside baseball, but on liability insurance, we're very concerned of frivolous lawsuits of someone going to a resort and saying, I got COVID there. It's just like you go somewhere and can't say I got the cold there. So that'll be a change. I think airlines and cruise ships and tour companies are going to have to look at their refund and change of date policies. I don't think people are willing to plunk down. Like I'm going on a safari next year. It's $20-some thousand, but I want to make sure with TAUC, the group I'm going with, could I cancel if something changed 6 months from now, and which I can. So I think it's going to be very important for people to have refund or rebooking policies where in the past they didn't have that. It was sort of like you plunk your down and you're stuck. That's going to change. And as I say, I think the assurances that the properties have, certification is going to happen too. I think you're going to find people who say my property is certified by some health organization or whatever, and people are going to trust that more than maybe I promise you I did all the steps for protocol. So I think we'll see changes like that.
I mean, think about that, Juliet. I strongly agree with this whole question of the travel insurance area is probably going to be a space that is going to be transformed and changed, and as it ties into the whole question of cancellation and policies and things of that nature and refunds, and it impacts on one of the points that was made earlier by Kathleen in terms of the whole question of cash is king. And you see the situation where you're going to have a jockeying between partners within the transaction in terms of where does the cash get held. So we've had a situation here where a lot of tour operators in the past would have held the money up front while the bookings were made and then paid the hotel or the resort down the road. But that has created such a phenomenal strain on the situation for the resorts that the resorts are now pushing back more. So everybody is more inclined to want to push forward in terms of cash retention and where they get paid. And at the same time, the visitor is not going to want to put cash into the pool as early, and it's going to be a lot more flexibility in terms of cancellation policy. So I think there's going to be a tension there in terms of that whole question of the various partners in the chain, whether it be the tour operator, the hotel, the airline, in terms of exactly how that transaction of credit takes place.
And Robert, you mentioned that you were working with the immigration office on sort of a bit more flexibility on the visa situation as well.
Yes. So as we look at high net worth individuals and persons who have flexibility of time to work anywhere in the world and who would say, well, look, you know what, there's madness in New York at this point in time. Let me go down to Barbados and work from my villa down there sort of scenario and wake up and go to the beach and before I do my first Zoom call. Those persons may want to travel longer. And since the whole question of travel now has so many, I don't want to say impediments, but conditionalities attached to it. You've got to do a COVID test, and then you've got to do this, and then you've got to provide that, and so on and so forth. You want to be able to do that and then know that, okay, I have to be monitored for the first 7 days of my visit, but I'm here for 6 months. So if I'm going for 6 months, then those things are a little less of a psychological barrier if you manage to work out that you're going for an extended period. So the Prime Minister has actually said that we're going to seek to do a kind of residency type of travel or residency type of visitor situation where when you come in, you're almost automatically granted a 6-month period for persons who want to stay in high net worth or high-end properties and have that kind of extended stay as a means of attracting them, but also reducing the psychological impact of some of the things they have to go through in order to travel in the first place.
And I know Prime Minister Mia Mottley's gone through, you've gone through a big transformation in Ireland, and like how much have you had to invest in things like infrastructure and Wi-Fi and things like that to sort of give people the reassurance that actually that's a great idea to come and do that?
Yes. So fortunately, Barbados has a fairly advanced level of technology deployment. So there's a large road infrastructure, and as a consequence, there's also a large fiber network throughout the country. But as you just said, free Wi-Fi is popping up more and more. So we recently had an initiative which has free Wi-Fi at the beaches. So if you want to do your Zoom meeting from the beach, then there's always that prospect. So that kind of enhanced capability is more and more being deployed. And there is also this challenge of then how do we make sure that we at the same time, it helps us with the technology divide in terms of persons who, because in this time of lockdown, a lot of students, a lot of kids are going to school on the internet. So you've got to manage the bandwidth situation and at the same time seek to provide them. So we're really pressing our partners, our service provider partners' feet to the fire and saying, listen, you guys got to step up to the plate and help us to make sure that as a country, we continue to have the capabilities that allow us to have the quality of life and attract the visitors and attract the persons and give those kind of added values that are so fundamental to the experience in Barbados.
Thank you. I've got one more question from the audience, and then I want to touch on the sustainability aspect of Six Senses, Neil and Roger. I think there's a question for you just around the role of CVBs. Is Robin Little there? Robin?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Robin. What was your
Hello.
question?
Yeah, my question is that I'm finding, being in this business for 30 years, that remarkably the CVBs across the country really don't have an understanding with FIT bookings or working with the 100,000 travel agents that are across the United States to book. And you're seeing that there's really not product for sale. We talk about the US and all these domestic travelers, but I don't think we're in a good position to really market and move people as well as everybody, you know, as well as selling the Caribbean, as well as selling Mexico, as well as selling Hawaii and Europe. I don't think we're there. And how can you instill in those CVBs that they need to kind of back off focusing on groups, which they can't sell now, and try to move FITs around the country and into their cities and into their areas?
Yeah, Robin, I think with crisis comes creativity. And I think that the CVBs found themselves in so many cities very dependent on group, and they will down the road in the future, but they're going to have to shift. I've watched, I'll give you an example, Visit Florida, the state has shifted their entire marketing towards drive and within distance there. The other thing, the CVBs in the US have a big problem. They were cut the PPP, which I don't want to get too technical, the Payment Protection Program, they cut out of this, and so they're broke. They have no money. And so we're pushing very hard to get money to the CVBs because otherwise they can't promote. But the CVB, the smart ones, are going to shift. In fact, I've talked to many CVB directors, and they told me they're bringing back to work their FIT people, and their group salespeople may be a little longer coming back to work.
Well, that would be good. That would be excellent. Not happening in Sacramento, but we'll hope it happens in California somewhere. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roman. Roger, I'm curious because the state by state and city by city across the country, there's so many variances with what's happening. How are you seeing sort of the collaboration across states? And because everyone's at such different phases, it's complicated, right? How is that sort of being managed?
We're seeing some partnerships come together, like the Western states. You'll get Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, et cetera, are actually working together on rules, regulations, and protocols, et cetera. It's very important how states come back. The travel industry is not going to come back until New York City and California comes back. California and New York City are so important, and right now with both of them marginally back, it's going to be a while. So we're doing all we can to encourage the right policies in New York City and California. And states have to work together. And with this domestic travel being the rule for the next 6 months to a year, they're going to have to come up with ways of going from Florida to Georgia to Tennessee, et cetera, and create itineraries that might have maybe been Spain, Portugal itineraries that they're going to have to do in the US.
Thank you. And Neil, sustainability, you touched on briefly earlier. It's such a core part of the Six Senses brand and ethos. How important do you see those values going forward, and how significant are they, and how much do you think your approach will change or remain the same or become even more important?
Well, again, like wellness, sustainability for us has always been a core value for 25 years. I mean, even back then we were growing a lot of our own food. We never had plastic. You know, we don't import, you know, mineral water from anywhere. We make our own water with reverse osmosis plants. And I mean, it's really an integral part of the DNA of the brand. And you know, over the years, what's become apparent is that, you know, wellness and sustainability actually are really the same thing, and they belong in the same bucket. So, you know, just as we're broadening our scope around wellness, we're doing that around sustainability too. And our activities, although we have big corporate initiatives around plastic and carbon footprint and so on, you know, a lot goes on locally. Actually, 0.5% of our revenue as a company is contractually at hotel level goes into all kinds of sustainable activity. So, you know, the efforts are both global and local, and they will continue and do continue. I mean, we're one of the few, you know, hotel groups that actually has a senior sustainability director in every hotel, and that's essential. And they sit on kind of the executive committee and keep everybody honest and so on. So a huge part of what we do.
And what excites you about this next period in the industry, Neil? Because you've opened by saying you're an optimist. What sort of bright spots do you see on the horizon? Well,
I mean, we've certainly been contacted for more and more projects, and, you know, in the next 18 months, we're opening from Israel to New York to India and so on. So that continues. That pipeline is still robust, which to me is a very good sign commercially and economically. But I do feel, I mean, you'll be fed up with hearing me talk about wellness, but I do feel that it's no longer optional, you know, and actually neither is sustainability. That train has left the station, and you know, to broaden those values and those activities around those functions is going to be more and more in demand from a traveling group. You know, particularly I think your readers and listeners are caring more and more about it. And before it was, yeah, I just want to have a good massage or a nice facial or something, but it's beyond that. And we see what people are buying, and we are convinced that as a result of COVID, that is just going to be stronger and stronger, which bodes well for what we do, actually. So that's where the optimism comes from.
And Robert, how are you feeling about the future? What bright spots do you see?
Well, I think the crisis, and as they say, no good crisis should be wasted. I think the crisis is going to drive us to be both more effective and efficient in both our marketing of the destination and also in identifying value propositions, new value propositions, because we have to identify new segments which are going to replace some of the segments which may have been expected in the interim period. And as we reach out to those new segments, whether they be a new millennial with a different perspective or whatever, I think those become growth opportunities for the future. So when the traditional segments begin to return, I think then there's growth from those which we have now reached. I think also it makes us hone our craft in terms of understanding what our audience is and what the prospective traveler is looking for, and be very effective in delivering that message so that they are convinced to come to our destination. On top of the whole question of making sure that we have the messaging right around health and wellness. And I think whether it's health and wellness, whether it's mindfulness, whether it's the whole question of just COVID protocols, I think that giving people that sense of safety plays well to where we see ourselves as a destination. We think we are a very safe destination in many, many different ways. And giving people that sense of safety is going to be an important part. So building on that messaging is to our benefit down the road, I believe.
Thank you, Robert. And Kathy and Roger, just before we close, Kathy, what excites you about this next period in the industry?
Well, I would sort of add on to what everyone else is saying, but I do think COVID has been a game changer. We now realize that small changes can make a very big difference in the impact in the environment. The waters are cleaner, the skies are cleaner, so forth. I do go back to what Roger said about trust, and that there's ways to build trust. I think trust is very important. I think there's some many beautiful areas in the United States that everyone can travel to and see, and certainly overseas. So I would say the fact that we've got like 3 incredibly smart, thoughtful, and insightful people on the call sharing some important ideas about how to move forward is what is giving me hope. And I do think that the trust, the wellness, the overall, the whole big holistic picture, and being able to find that balance of not just work, but be able to still enjoy life. We want to enjoy life, and travel is a big part of that. So that all gives me hope.
And Roger, finally, last thoughts and words from you.
Well, first of all, I think as technology is going to take a even bigger leap and more important in what we do. I also think when it comes to sustainability, there's been a lot of talk about over-tourism, and I think the industry has to be smart. But I'm now seeing areas like Spain, Iceland, and parts of California that didn't want tourists now saying, wait a minute, maybe we want them back. I think that is good. And last, I'm very bullish. I'm a contrarian, but I'm bullish on the cruise industry. I'm investing in cruise lines. I think they're going to be very good in the future. You're going to have a tough time for the next 6 months, but I think the future is strong for cruises.
Thank you. Roger, Robert, Neil and Kathy, thank you so much for such an insightful discussion into the travel and tourism industry. It was the different perspectives are incredibly thoughtful, and certainly I hope give our audience a lot of food for thought. Kathy, also thank you to you and to Morgan Stanley for being a partner for this series. Most importantly, thanks to all of you that joined us today and for your great questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to them all, but I hope you enjoyed it, and please do share any feedback with us. We'd love to hear any comments. You can email us at community@worth.com. Next week on Worth Live, we'll be hearing from Mayor Frank G. Jackson, the Mayor of Cleveland, on leading through crisis as part of our Families and Communities of Worth series. That's on Tuesday, 1 p.m. ET, and on Wednesday at 4 p.m. ET is the next session of The Next Normal, and we're joined by Amy Wu, founder of From Farms to Incubators, and Dr. Darius Mozaffarian, Dean at Tufts University and Professor of Nutrition, where we'll discuss the future of agriculture and food, and Kathy will be joining us for that as well. Please register online, worth.com/events for all of these events, as well as sign up for our weekly newsletter online at worth.com. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your day. Stay healthy, stay safe, and thank you again, speakers, for such an excellent discussion. Thank you.
Thank you
Very much.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.